All right, everyone, welcome to the second episode of Divulgence. I'm very happy to welcome back to the show our next guest. He is an author, filmmaker, and investigator. He hosts an excellent podcast named William Ramsey Investigates, which I personally highly recommend. He covers a lot of great topics, and he talks to a lot of excellent guests. He is the author of Abomination, which is devil worship and deception in the West Memphis Three murders, which is an excellent source as well, which is on the topic that we're going to be discussing today. So I'm very happy to welcome back my new friend, William Ramsey. Hey, William, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me back, Jordan.
No problem. Thank you so much for coming back. It really is a pleasure for me. So today we are going to be discussing the West Memphis Three. For people who aren't aware of what that is, the West Memphis Three is the name that was deemed to the three suspects and later convicted of the crime that we'll be talking about. So essentially on May 5th, 1993, three young boys, Chris Byers, Stevie Branch, and Michael Moore, gathered that evening. They were riding their bikes in the Robin Hood Hills area of West Memphis, Arkansas, and essentially they were brutally tortured, murdered, and found. Were they found the next day, William?
Yes, they were found in water the next day, correct.
Okay. Yeah, so they were found, I think all three of them were found in the water in the Creek River area, and there were three teenage boys that were essentially the main suspects, and their names are Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly Jr. To my knowledge, Damien Echols and Jason Baldwin were pretty close friends, and Jesse Miskelly Jr. was a little bit less familiar with them.
He was in their larger circle of friends, it seems like.
Right, but he got kind of looped in with them just with the unfolding of the events that transpired and led to the murders. So one big thing that we will talk about today in a general sense is the misconception of not only the case, but also whether or not these three boys, now men, are actually guilty of this crime. So again, your book is an excellent resource on that. My first introduction to this case was actually the movie The Devil's Knot, which is based on a book which, if I'm not mistaken, it sounds like in your book the book is more factual than what the movie is portraying.
Well,
am I wrong on that?
The Mara Leverett book was supposed to be the book of record for the West Memphis Three. Devil's Knot, and that was what the book was based. I mean, the movie was based on. So, I would dispute that.
Okay, fair enough.
I think that I include things in my. I think her basic gist or premise was that the stepfather was suspicious. One of the stepfathers who's suspicious. Who's passed away now, actually.
Right, John Mark Byers. He just passed away not too long ago. So I will ask you about him as well later. So between the movie The Devil's Knot, the three HBO documentaries that are out there, and then I think another popular one is West of Memphis. Am I correct on that?
Right. So, I mean, I would say that the original documentary was called Paradise Lost, and that was done by two guys who were documentarians. One is still around, Joe Berlinger and Sinofsky, who passed away. But then they kind of carried that on. I believe it was done through, I can't remember which company, but then they ended up doing three documentaries in total on the West Memphis Three case. But they did the original one. The murders took place in 93. They were arrested on June 3rd, 1993, and tried in 1994, convicted in two separate courts. So they had to bifurcate the trials. So Miskelly was tried separately from Baldwin. So you had 24 juries unanimously say they were guilty. And then the documentary came out in 1996, and then there were concurrent documentaries. But if you watch the first documentary, they certainly doesn't look like the public opinion has really changed yet. But the second and third, I think, were very much skewing the facts of the original trial.
Can you quickly speak to does the finger pointing not change somewhere through these three documentaries as well? Like, there's quite a bit of flip-flopping.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that there's been flip-flopping through the entire kind of case. So It's really a saga. If you look at it, it's really almost at 30 years right now, since from the original deaths of the 3 8-year-old boys to the present. and it's gone through a variety of changes. But like you said, I believe that there's 3 documentaries. The second and third really changed. And it was HBO, I believe, who did the documentaries.
Correct, yes.
And I believe that they were very irresponsible in the second and third documentaries by trying to pin the blame on first Byers and then Hobbs.
And then
And
Hobbs.
if you see, if you can just compare and contrast facts, you can tell that there's some change between the second and third documentary, because in the second documentary, I believe either it's Baldwin or Echols who says, I'm 100% convinced it's Byers who did it. So they're letting them say it on trial. And then now it's shifted to Hobbs, and Hobbs has been the alternate perpetrator of choice for, it seems like, in my opinion, for Echols and Baldwin. And Mescali just dropped out. He's not a public person at all.
No.
But he doesn't do interviews or anything like that. But, you know, after they got out of jail, I mean, it was interesting because their probation lasted 10 years. It started in 2011 and just ended last month. So
Okay.
they're literally done with that. But all 3 are guilty. They're actually kind of unique in criminal history, really criminal trial history, is that they were found guilty twice. So they were found guilty in 1994. And then to get out of court, they signed that they were credibly guilty, and they signed on the dotted line. Adults said that they could credibly they actually pled guilty to first-degree murder, but they didn't admit publicly. It's called an Alford plea. It's based
Alford
upon
plea.
Alford, North Carolina. It's a Supreme Court plea, Supreme Court case. That the basic decision in that case was that you can plead guilty, but keep stating you're innocent publicly. So they pulled an Alford plea. They got out after a lot of pressure on that. But I mean, I think that you have to kind of see this case as it develops. Maybe some other long-term criminal cases are like it, but I think the West Memphis Three really is a saga with a lot of changes and a lot of strange things involved that involve the court of public opinion, celebrity,
Absolutely.
media. So a lot of themes are in there. Satanism, Crowley. I mean, you can read the intro to my book. Really, what got me interested in this case was I had just finished really a biography about Crowley, which was Prophet of Evil. And I was actually researching a book that I wrote later, which is Children of the Beast. And I was just kind of looking through and scrolling through YouTube, and I saw this video of Damien Echols in court, and the prosecutor, I believe his name was Price, is asking him about a document that had the name of Aleister Crowley on it. It actually had his name, Baldwin, in a kind of a secret,
I think.
yeah, secret alphabet. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I had seen the case. I remember watching the documentary in 1996, and I was like, okay, that's done. At that time, I just thought they were guilty. And I had heard they got out of jail 2011. I didn't really think much of it. I just thought, oh, there must have been a technicality or some kind of weird legal glitch or something, and they got out because, you know, there's Innocence Project. So I just thought that was the case. But then when I saw this thing that Crowley was involved, I was like, Crowley was involved in this case? I better look into this more.
Okay.
And I kind of had legal, I mean, I'm a lawyer. I'm a member of the State Bar of California, so I'd gone through legal training. I've taken the bar, and I've been a member now for 23 years. And so I really kind of put my legal hat on and started really looking through the case, like what's Crowley doing in this? And at that time, really when I started researching in 2012, 2013, it was generally accepted that they were innocent, railroaded, it was a witch hunt.
Satanic
and I saw
Panic.
Satanic Panic, there was all these kind of loaded terms. And they were in the media, you know, 2012, when they got out 2011. So 2012, I saw them on all these important people, Piers Morgan, The View, you know, talking about their, mostly Damien Echols, but sometimes with Jason Baldwin. So I was like, oh, well, this is weird. Well, let me look at for the documents. Well, luckily people had compiled all of the court documents in a site, which comes and goes, but back then it was called Callahan's, and Callahan after Dirty Harry, right? So you could go through, and they weren't really, I didn't think that they were properly laid out in a, really, there was no timeline. They just had names of the documents. And so I was like, well, this isn't like really clearly laid out. So let me lay out these cases. Let me look at the time frame, look at all this evidence. There's tons of like journals, written evidence, pictures, all this stuff that was in there that somebody had been, I forgot the guy's name offhand, but he was in Arkansas and he was getting it out of the court records.
Okay.
So that kind of made me go on. And there was a lot of head scratching when I was looking through there, because I just kept seeing stuff that goes, these guys look really guilty. Like this was not a case that was casually brought about. Like they say that they were railroaded. Well, the murders took place on the 5th. They were arrested the next month on the 3rd. So it took them a month to find you. Like they said that they had tunnel vision, and they actually made that argument in court that the police had tunnel vision and the police are corrupt. They kind of inferred that. So I was like, whoa, there's all the, and the courts had these, there are records that came up later about Damien Echols' psych history, which is 3 different hospital stays, 1 in Oregon and 2 in Arkansas.
Oh, those are interesting. Those are interesting in your book, I must say. Yes. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay, but those people weren't talking about that. They weren't talking about his writings or being kissed on the hand by Rosie, this entity he's talking to, that he's writing about in his journals. And just as I started going through it more and more, and then I'm researching all these people who helped them helped them or supported them through their processes. And I didn't know much about Johnny Depp or all these other characters, but then I started researching Johnny Depp, and I'm like, whoa, this guy has a curious history too. And Margaret Cho, and
yes,
just a bunch of
interesting Peter Jackson, Eddie Vedder, and interesting.
Yeah.
Even Jack Black, I saw his name pop up. Natalie from the Dixie Chicks. There's an interesting kind of group of people there that are pushing for him quite hard as well. James Hetfield from Metallica did quite a big push, and they allowed their music to be used in the first HBO documentary, and that was the first time Metallica had done that, and that was a huge deal because I assume that might have been around the Napster and the stealing of music stuff. So for Metallica, it was a big deal. So for a Metallica fan, you listen to that and watch that, you think, well, Metallica thinks they're innocent, so they're innocent.
Right. So, celebrity work. So that's really the kind of interesting impact in this case. And I believe that Berlinger directed Some Kind of Monster. So I think he had some kind of relationship with Metallica. But it just keeps unfolding. You see more and more permutations. Anyway, there's some incredible pictures that I came across of Berlinger and Sinofsky with the whole cast of characters. They had this whole group in LA that I don't think were involved in Celebrity, but they came to be known as the KGB based upon their last names. And there's this picture of them, and it's Berlinger, Sinofsky, all 3 Miskelly, Baldwin, Echols, the KGB, just this whole group hanging out together. It's very kind of, and like one of the producers from HBO, it's very non-objective is a way I would put it. Like these are people who might have more invested than merely objective, like non-biased inquiry. So that's the whole thing about this case is you start reading this stuff and it just gets weirder and weirder. You find out later that Mara Leverett's girlfriend is friends with Damien Echols' wife, and who's
that Mara Leverett?
Mara Leverett was the writer of Devil's Knot.
Oh, of Devil's Knot, yes. Okay.
The supposed book of record. Anyway, there's so much in this case. So the real remarkable thing, I think that the real driver is really Damien Echols, who was the oldest one, seems to be the most influential, and really was the one and his wife pushing for their innocence. And once they got the real grip on the celebrities and their money and then created General Money, they were able to get a very excellent, very well-known attorney out here in California who had represented I think it's either Bobby or Barry Bonds, the son of Bond's son, who was, if you remember, he was in a steroid scandal. Yeah. And his name is, I just can't remember right now, but he was an excellent lawyer, and they started really grinding through that. They got money.
Millions.
What's that?
They got millions of dollars. All this exposure was in such an excellent light with these celebrities, right? These guys were railroaded. It was for a crime they didn't commit. They really had a really good media, and then they ended up getting a media expert, a public relations expert by the name of Lonnie Sori. So I don't know if he's still related to them, but so then he had the public relations expert. You had this excellent appellate attorney, and they really found the lever of the whole case was really about DNA evidence and whether DNA evidence was admissible. Now, they never showed that, but they were able to kind of use that as a lever for future
anticipating that there would be future proceedings that could make the state. I mean, this is the rationale why they got out, or why there's a lot of rationales why they got out, but it was this kind of DNA thing, which is still going on today. We talked about the pre-show. That really kind of was the lever that got the new, I forgot the guy's name, but there had been, the judge had changed by the time 2011 rolled around, and they had a new DA. And I guess these guys just said, for whatever reason, yeah, let's let them out, let them convicted, and time served for 17 years, and that was it. So they were gone, and under, they could. And that's one thing they don't even talk about is, that they committed, again, they admitted guilt. And you can see the paperwork. I mean, they have their names on there. Anyway, there's a lot of ways to go, but that's really kind of the long overarch of the entire kind of saga all the way to 2021. Echols got out. What does he do? Immediately goes out and gets these really brutal tattoos all over his body and his back, and starts writing occult literature again. I think he's on his like 4th or 5th book about sorcery or whatever, and he's constantly posting on social media. And he was accused of being obsessed with the occult prior to the events, and then he gets out of jail, and it's like right back at it, baby. And during the kind of research of that, there was something that popped up that he was a member of Aleister Crowley's OTO in Arkansas. In the article, you can look it up right now. It's SK 931, which was his prison record. And yeah, so I mean, it just confirmed, like they're saying, this is our brother or whatever. And he actually donated enough literature or books of his to start at their own kind of headquarters or OTO temple or whatever they call it, Oasis in Arkansas, to start the Damien Echols Library.
So he's pushing for it still. He's pushing it right out there.
This is back before he got out. So this is back, I think it was written before.
Oh, this was before he got out.
Yeah, so they were talking about him as an OTO member. I can probably pull that up right now. Maybe I could share it. But there's just so much going on. And and really going back to the beginning, the head scratching, I think that once I knew that they were guilty, I mean, people use these terms, these legal terms, I think inaccurately. Do you think they're guilty? This is something that happens in a court of law. In a court of law, they were found guilty, so they're definitely guilty. They're guilty twice. So the real question, the real way that it should be phrased is, were they unjustly found guilty? Was there something in the trial or something that led to an unjust verdict? Or so there, I think those terms, I would politely suggest be careful about saying they're guilty, because they're clearly guilty. If you go to a judge and you ask him and you say, here's the court documents, what do you think? They'll say they're definitely guilty, because that's what happened in court. Okay. So anyway, I was assuming that the court system works, which these days, that's right. So they're clearly guilty. They were in, probation. And then you have, I mean, maybe you could, maybe that elicits the question, what are the things that show that they weren't guilty? I mean, you had all this in testimony of statements from people who heard them admitting that they did it at a softball game. You had a whole family seeing them by the embankment somewhere around there on a service road, drove by and saw them. They testified. And there were other inquiries on the court that Damien Echols knew information that wasn't in the newspapers, and I think he admitted that. So the jury looking at that, I think that's why they all said guilty. That's why it was unanimous, is that they saw that. And so that all gets scrambled, and you have a bunch of people who've never done their homework or never done any research and don't understand the meaning of basic terminology, legal or not, talking about this case. And that's really the court of public opinion. It's not brain trust. It's not a bunch of Einstein. So they key into certain things and miss whole things about the process of American jurisprudence and going through the criminal law procedure is something that's been tried and tested and perfected to ensure the outcomes generally are the same. And nobody really looks at that, like what are the so-called outcomes that would lead to a perverted decision to find guilty. And almost nobody even can go through that. There's really good sites out there. You can look at all the facts. West Memphis Three facts.org. It's really, somebody else compiled that, not me. And that's one of the things that I listen to. Anyway, there's a lot about this case. You can talk on.
Absolutely. So just speaking to Damien revealing or giving out details that weren't in the newspaper and widely unknown, in your book you do reference a Steve Jones from the juvenile authority who was said to have told Damien about the castration of the one boy and then the urination piece in the boys' mouths. So are there other big details that he'd given out?
I mean, if you go, there was an original, Jones, I think, was one of the original cops, right? Wasn't that the original cop who went and talked to him and took notes? If I remember correctly, Jones, let me look it up. There was a guy who was the probation.
Jerry Driver?
Jerry Driver, yeah, that's the probation. So Jones, I think, was
Steve Jones, I have here. He's an officer with West Memphis.
That's right.
Police.
Juvenile officer, right. So he went to go check, and he and Alan went, and I think that he was the one who found the bodies, right? Was that, I think Jones was
I could have sworn, okay, so Gary Glitchell wasn't there with the bodies, and...
later. I think Glitchell was the chief of police, right?
Yes, correct. And then I think, was it Ridge or Sudbury who had found the bodies?
Ridge and Sudbury, that sounds right. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Let me see if I can find
Okay,
this.
so am I mixing it up?
No, I think it's...
So Damien told Steve Jones this, or Steve Jones divulged this to Damien?
Right. His real name is Michael Hutchinson. That his name, he changed
Damien.
it to Damien Echols. I'm trying to find this.
Michael Wayne Hutchinson.
Yeah, Michael Wayne. There was the field report is the one that I found interesting, with Ridge and Sudbury asking questions. Let's see.
And this is where he...
That's where he talked to
by Satanists, and they probably wanted power, and they depict that conversation somewhat accurately, anyways, in the movie, but they go down the wrong route, obviously.
Well, it seems like that movie, West Memphis 3, at the end, they didn't have a solution, right?
I think not at all.
Left it vague and said, "Yeah, oh well, something happened. We don't really know. Bye."
Yeah,
and that was it. I mean, it's kind of.
I was unimpressed with the first one. Well, yeah.
I mean, they had some big time actors. That guy who was I think that guy didn't he win an Oscar? Who was the
Colin Firth?
Yeah, Colin Firth.
I think he was at least nominated.
Yeah.
But no, shout out to Kevin Durand, Thunder Bay. He played John Mark Byers. So
interesting.
Hometown represent. But it was a star-studded movie, my friend. Yeah. I mean, you had Colin Firth opposite to Reese Witherspoon to begin with. So, she gets a big pull.
Yeah, Reese Witherspoon, that's right. He won a Golden Globe, British Academy Film Award, and the Screen Actors Guild Award for The King's Speech in 2010. So, anyway.
It's funny, they got the most British guy to play. Guy from Arkansas, investigator from Arkansas.
Guy, yeah. I got to tell you, I've gone through multiple books since this one. I definitely am a little rusty on the fact, but if I remember correctly, there were investigations between May 5th and June 3rd, and there were some questions that Echols seemed to know more about what happened at May 5th than he said, and some things in court, I have to go back through.
Okay.
It's been a while. Sorry.
Is it fair to say that with some of his questioning and his answering, like he's kind of taunting these police?
I think a little bit.
Like I mean, especially when he speaks of Satanism and the power and
Right. What do you think is getting power? Which, I think that they asked him one question, which is like, what do you know about this? Do you know about the occult? And he says, I know everything about the occult. So he said that at 18 years old in court, which is why he got the death penalty, because he was an adult and he was tried as an adult. But, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it seems like he was dodging when Price is asking him. I mean, one of the element of when that question was about the thing about Crowley is that on the table in the video is a copy of Crowley's Magic in Theory and Practice. So I know that cover. So that was like another element of this case where it made me sit up in my chair like, what's going on? But
he has a history of denying and lying well before the case. The documents you bring from the juvenile and the hospitals, there's incidents where there's so many witnesses, like for him sucking the blood out of a guy's neck or, saying some pretty vivid things, he'll deny it right off the bat. And I mean, he's denied Satanism so much, but then there's a lot of instances where he talks about, no, I'm into Satanism, and his tattoos and actions and
writings give it away.
Writings, yeah.
And the reason Exhibit 500 is called Exhibit 500 because it's 500 pages long. It's long. It's not like a 2-page document. And it was something that his own lawyer, and this is very important, it was his defense lawyers put together after his conviction to try to overturn the death penalty. So it wasn't I don't think it was in the original murder case. I mean, just go through these appeals and things like that. But yeah, they had stuff. In one Vice article after his release, he made an admission that was very telling, and if he ever goes in court again, will be very damning, in my opinion, because he told Vice, I was prosecuted for my love of the knowledge of Aleister Crowley. So everything that the court had said before 94, in my opinion, he verified right there after 2011. So, I mean, I don't think they knew the totality of his interests. And I do believe he's very interested. I mean, he admits it. Then you can throw in his documentary that he did, which was called West of Memphis.
Oh, that was his. Okay.
Yeah. So West of Memphis was his. And at the very end, he says, this is his own statement. These are like evidentiary things that get put into court under rules of evidence because they're statements you made. He says, in the end, I wanted to be the greatest magician that ever lived. And all this stuff is like Archmage 11, so you throw in Crowley's favorite number. Those are his tags on his social media. He bathes in the moon. This is his own statement. He drinks moon water. I mean, he has a very strange world. I mean, it's psychological analysis of that guy, based upon other people's psychological analysis, in my opinion, it's not normal.
Mm-hmm. Your blog speaks well to that, I must say as well. So for anyone who wants to check out William's blogs on his website, there's some good ones about Damien Echols and just his psychology and the action, the ones, and the one about the silence.
Yeah,
was very good. That was a nice read.
Yeah, so making the gestures, the occult gestures. He's He went to Salem, Massachusetts, because he supposedly identified with that there. That's where the witch trials were. Now apparently he's going to New Orleans, is my understanding. What's going on? So yeah, there's just so much. There's so much in that case. I mean, you can go through. I mean, what else is in that book? It just goes on and on. He was with his dominie, and her relatives are like blood drinkers, like they're known blood drinkers.
Okay.
One drinks blood, I drink blood. I think that was on an Ed Opperman report show. So there's just all kinds of really strange things. He failed his lie detector test. So the lie detector test is in my book. And then he said, if you let me talk to my mom, I'll tell you everything.
Yeah. What do you think about that part? Because then, he gets to see his mom, and then he just goes back to the denial.
Yes. So there's other, just strange things. I don't know if that's really applicable in a court of law, but very curious. Mm-hmm. So, when you look at the totality of everything, it's just like the story in public of them being kind of innocent gods and things like that are not good. I mean, I have the whole Albert Clem Bly statement. Do you remember that one? Where Bly was talking about how they had a satanic book and they answered to somebody they called Satan or something, and they went out in the Stonehenge. And so he was making these statements that there was kind of cold activity there. And that was what was in Miss Kelly's original. And we can go into the Miss Kelly confessions. That was when the original confession that they always say was fake because Miss Kelly has a 70 IQ.
Right.
He's definitely not that bright. So you can throw away that confession. But after he was arrested, they never mentioned the post-conviction confessions against interest, which are recorded, where he's just saying this, yeah, I did it, we did it, blah, blah, I don't remember it verbatim. Why are you doing this? He's actually arguing with his attorney, whose attorney saying, you don't have to do this. You shouldn't do this. The attorney's doing a good job because he's trying to keep him from implicating himself again. And Miss Kelly seems to me to be the one who had a conscience out of them all. So those post confessions almost are never mentioned in anybody who thinks that they're innocent, or they just ignore them like, oh, I can write that off as some, but they're recorded and you can listen to them. So,
Okay.
I mean, you can listen to them online. You can just type into YouTube and actually listen to those statements and be a judge for yourself. Like I listened to those and it just verified everything. So you've got the Exhibit 500, the post Jesse, Miss Kelly confession. So there's a lot, and you have all the in-court testimony. So you just have this overarching. If they ever went back to court, that would be included in those statements, was Miss Kelly's post conviction statements.
Gotcha. Okay. And again, just going back to speaking to Damien's past before the murders, you have it that one of his social workers had put that he was told that he was going to become another Charles Manson or a Ted Bundy. And then even more interesting, Damien saying himself that, you know, he knows he's going to change the world. He knows that people are going to remember him. And then even in February, just a few months before the murders, he declares himself a sociopath on one of his outtake forms, I think, maybe.
It was either his outtake form or he was applying for.
I think it was after he had already had the Social Security applications going, but I could be wrong. But yeah, so
sociopath, psychopath. I think he wrote that down. There's all kinds of stuff. Who's your favorite author? Stephen King, Anton LaVey. Like, what are you reading? Like, it just. I mean, there's just so much there, and I believe, in my opinion, he lied on the stand about the pentagram tattoo that he had on his chest prior to his arrest in 1993, because they were talking to him, and I could see pictures of him. It looked like a downward-facing pentagram, and they blow that off too. So
did he? Sorry, I'm actually unaware about this one. So he had a tattoo. He got it removed.
Right here on his chest, downward-facing pentagram, and then I think that I have a video about that. I think you can see it on YouTube. I think YouTube kind of book burned that memory hole of that one. But I kind of went into that, 7 years ago, about how they were asking him on the stand about that. And I thought that he was prevaricating about really which way it pointed. Because in the occult or Wicca, which he said he was a member of, right?
Many times.
And when he was in jail after he was arrested, he wanted the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, if I remember correctly. So he was definitely kind of trying to get that kind of stuff. That's Gardnerian type of witchcraft. But he the downward facing pentagram is supposed in the witchcraft is much more sinister than the upward facing star.
Okay.
So when you see it facing downward, it has more connotations of black magic, is my understanding. I mean, they just go on. People said, oh, yeah, I can't remember. One statement of one girl was like, oh, yeah, he'll say he's a white magician, but he's really a black magician. And there's all kinds of stomping on dead dogs. It's just the legacy of stuff. I'm going to kill you. And, I mean, you can kind of see how, like, there was John Douglas, who was an FBI agent. I mean, just some of the weirdest stuff in this case. This is supposedly a reputable, profiler, FBI profiler, and all this work is done on his case. You can go read his book on the West Memphis Three. He has
one. Okay.
Yeah, and I think I included it in the last part of the book. It's an atrocity, in my opinion. It's just that he had all kinds of statements where some of his books have an additional author, which you can interpret different ways. Some of these, I'm not saying that he did, I don't know, but oftentimes when there's an additional author, like John Douglas plus Joe Smith, usually Joe Smith wrote it and John Douglas put his name on it.
Yeah.
Sometimes. So I don't know what happened in the case of that book. I'd have to, and that's actually John Douglas and the West Memphis Three is in my blog on my website. People can check that out. But I just pass through and just do a simple contrast of the actual court records and what Douglas says. And he didn't read the court records. He could not have read, in my opinion, he could not have read the court records because he got it so wrong with ignoring factual things that had happened in the case. Like these guys had been arrested. And I think Echols was like living in somebody's trailer at the time and he got arrested. So he was on probation. And Jesse had been arrested for punching people. And I think they had already had tangles with the police, and just Douglas just, and that shows you a lot of these people that you might respect as people with reputations that are inviolate. Yeah, you might want to think again. So in my opinion, Douglas just did a terrible job on the West. And that's actually, in my opinion, there's so many books about the West Memphis Three. When you see omissions of fact, when you don't see mentions of post-conviction confessions or the Exhibit 500, you have to really ask, why are they not in these books?
You think maybe they're ignoring them?
Why? Right. I mean, you can't ignore, you cannot. George Orwell said omission is the greatest form of lie. So why are you omitting these things in this? Are you just negligent? Are you sloppy? Do you just have your own set? And I mean, it goes into how you perceive reality. Like, I've already have a conclusion, so I'm only taking the facts or any data and taking what fits that model. Because I've already had it. Because Johnny Depp said he's innocent. Therefore, only the things that I see will go and support that. Or do you just try to look at something unbiased and go, let me look at the whole story of this. Let me look at what everybody said, what happened in court. I mean, the reason, it's just very strange, because the reason the court system is designed is so that it's an untainted environment where you're getting evidence and professionals and time to go through and make a effective decision. And just some of these people blow that stuff off. It's just like, what are you thinking? It just doesn't make sense. So a lot of that the testimony, if you perjure yourself in court, you can go to jail. Typically perjury convictions are like 5 years. Okay. So, I mean, there's just a lot of problems with this, and it's really just a larger sociological problem about innocence, stupidity. I mean, there's still people I don't want to say who their names are, but there's podcasts that's just still going with, like, these guys were railroaded line to this day. And I think it's the power of public relations, because I think that's
sure, Bill. Yeah,
it's a much better story. It's a much more heartwarming story to think that these three innocent guys had a whole future ahead of them, and somebody just came in and ruined it, and the government just was a bunch of bullies. And there were a bunch of legal snobs and, hillbilly, moonshine swilling Southerners. That's actually part of the story. Like, some of these people think, like, the Arkansas judges were just a bunch of KKK members. Okay. So stupid. Some of these people believe that. But so that's like the farce of it. And actually, when I published my book, by the way, that's kind of funny, because the Supreme Court of Arkansas put it up on their website as a recommended book. So, so I was on their website as a recommended book, and I was right under, oh God, what's the guy who wrote the Pelican Brief? John
Grisham?
Yeah, John Grisham. So John Grisham and I were.
Nice.
And Grisham. Yeah, no, it was even better because Grisham is one of those people who thinks the West Memphis Three were railroaded.
That's great. Is that right?
Oh yeah, no, okay. I got a screenshot of it. It's on my old social media. I download everything off of Facebook, so I got it somewhere. Cool. But it's just one of those funny things, like it was sitting up there. Anyway, it's just one of those weird things. The other thing is, like, I got attacked so ferociously for publishing that book. Like, I was stalked. My social media was stalked. I've been doxxed 3 or 4 times. It's too funny, because that was not an acceptable opinion at all. That was really kind of like, you have to be out of your freaking mind to write this. I mean, also, I think it goes into a lot of things. The satanic panic concept is like the conspiracy theory thing. It's a loaded term. It's supposed to quell debate. It's supposed to put people in the loony bin box, where they should be in a rubber room. And the fact is that there are Satanists. Like, I can go and look at books on Amazon, and the #1 selling book in occultism is the Satanic Bible. So somebody's still reading this stuff. So I'm not saying Satanism is out there all over the place, but just to automatically discount something as satanic panic, yeah, no, that's a mistake. So anyway, so it was just too much. I mean, I would be on Twitter, people would be stalking me. It's just off the charts.
That's awful.
Yeah, no, I mean, anyway, I would just suggest people read the book, do themselves, disabuse yourself of all. I'm not saying you. I'm not saying you, Jordan. I'm just saying anybody.
Yeah.
Just read the book and follow and see it, because it's all based on, like, somebody critiqued me saying all it is a rewriting of all these court documents. That's the point. That's the point.
But it's an excellent read, Bill. It's an excellent read, that's for sure. It is a very good resource. So I mean, their mindset's already skewed, right? So it's difficult to change that sometimes.
It's hard to believe that that many people would be involved in kind of a social movement to get somebody who shouldn't be out of jail. Oh, who should be in jail, out of jail. And there's actually, and that goes to the larger thing. I've talked to Roberta Glass of the True Crime Report a lot about innocence fraud, and that seems to be kind of something that's happening in society, where some nitwit who, like Kim Kardashian, can just use her power to try to overturn court processes by saying somebody's innocent. And it goes back to that one story about the guy who killed his girlfriend. Was it Serial? That was a huge pop. That's another innocence fraud. And people just went crazy about this guy. And you look through all that stuff, and he did it. Like, in my opinion, they did disabuse this. So I think it's very fashionable and popular. So they're actually appealing to the worst trait. And there's other people whose names I will not mention. But they're appealing to the worst kind of traits in individuals by skewing some of these court cases and creating sensationalism and drama where there shouldn't be, because some of these cases are cut and dried. And so, in my opinion, that's what Serial did. Like, I got a good story. I'm going with it. This is my story. And you see that a lot in some of these court cases and some of these variations. I think in my opinion, same thing happened with that guy who killed that one woman. I can't remember. It was a whole documentary on Netflix. That was totally, in my opinion,
like totally, making a murderer. You're most likely.
Murder. That's another one. It's just like 8 hours of wasted time. Like, this guy was guilty. He did it. Move on. There's no other people there involved. And that kid who had an on video admission. So it's the capacity to. I think it's really a public issue where the public is not giving enough credence to the court system and what they paid their tax money to get professionals to really do it. And I mean, that was the whole thing. They had that guy Ken Kratz, if you remember, making.
I remember Ken Kratz.
Bad guy.
Yeah, yes, he's a character. Yeah.
And actually, the same thing has happened also, in my opinion, in the Central Park 5 case. Do you remember when
Absolutely,
they see
yes.
us? And the way it was all structured, to me, was extremely irresponsible, because they turned it into a whole story of race. And they actually took this lady, Linda Fairstein, who had a very good history, a quality history, a well-known history of like sex crimes prosecutions. And she was, and they just turned her into kind of like the shrill white, personification of evil. And it's interesting because she and these other people anticipated that happening when Netflix was doing its movie about that, or when they see us. And she's like, guys, don't do this. I really was trying to do the right thing, and you better not do it. And you better not try to, I'm telling you, this is exactly the facts of the case. And then they put out When They See Us, and I think it got awards, and they've
why wouldn't it?
They've successfully whitewashed these 5 guys, in my opinion. And she's suing Netflix and these people because of what they've done. So they're in court. I don't know how they can get away with it. And she anticipated, like, this is defamation. Like, I'm trying to do my job as a member of the state. Whoa, word to the audience, black people commit crimes, white people commit crimes. Making a Murder was about white people. It's not about anti-white trash racism.
Sure.
So to bring those into some of these cases and grind and acts, like, you see that a lot of these people too is hyper irresponsible. And I think that's kind of what happens in these cases. All these are broader cases. So I think you can see the West Memphis Three in the context of these broader innocence fraud cases within people wanting to have a better story than the story that's there, or kind of facilitating sensationalism. I really think it's there. And the sad thing is that the chumps in America are eating that stuff up without really getting a far more objective view. So West Memphis Three is not alone.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help with just the emergence and growing of these different movements, and they can just jump onto it, whether it's a race thing or a sexuality thing or or a satanic panic thing. And then it turns into mob mentality, and it just gets cloudy from there, and then people aren't looking at the facts.
Yeah, it's dangerous to the system. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
You got to really watch out that this kind of mobocracy involvement. Yeah, not good. It's not a good trend.
All right, let's take a look at Bill's.
There it is.
There it is. Wonderful.
Yeah, that was it. That was back in the days.
2 John Grisham books. That's great. Congrats. That's
yeah. Go look at John Grisham's opinion of the West Memphis Three. Put those 2 names together. Yeah. Anyway, cool. Just funny little things kind of happen like that. But yeah, it was quite a ride. I was pretty lonely at that time. Although what happened is all the people who knew there was something skeezy with the whole West Memphis Three situation kind of got together. So I bonded with a lot of different people. Gary Meese, I would recommend to the listeners, does his own podcast. He's written 3 books about the West Memphis Three. He was in West Memphis at the time. He's done excellent work, great books, and there's a pod. I think it's on Podbean. But if you look up Gary Meese, you really want to kind of get a sober, rational, thoughtful, facts-based analysis of the West Memphis Three. I could not recommend his stuff enough. Gary Meese, MEEC, and I've interviewed him on my podcast before. So anyway, it's just to me the injustice is that they got out, and the real story gets lost in these 3 8-year-old kids who didn't have a chance to grow up.
Yes,
and that's really the real injustice that gets lost in these fake stories and irresponsible narratives. And it's too bad. It's really kind of a shame.
What about I'll play the devil's advocate on this one. So this is a big piece for the people that I would think they're innocent, but I think a lot of people that's watch the Hollywood film go on this piece. So we're going to talk about the man at Bojangles. So for the people who aren't aware, the same night of the murders at approximately 8:45, the Bojangles restaurant, which was approximately a mile from the Robin Hood Hills area where the murders took place, they received a call about a middle-aged black man who entered the women's washroom. He was covered in blood. He was covered in mud. He had water soaked up to his knees. And unfortunately, by the time the cops got there, he was gone. And the blood sample that was eventually found by Detective Ridge, I believe, he had put it in his desk, forgot about it, and it may or may not have been lost. I'm not sure on that piece. But essentially, I mean, obviously it's possible for more crimes to happen in a given night that could include mud and water and whatnot. What's your piece on that, Bill? What can you
Well,
speak?
A lot of strange things happened that night. So it was May 5th. And I don't even discount anything that happened in Bojangles. So my opinion is that there may have been other people that were involved that never got caught. And so that guy might have been part of it in some relationship, maybe somewhere around there at the time of the murders who were friends or associates. But it's obvious to me, looking at all the facts, is that they were part of a larger network.
Sure.
There were other people involved. They were, according to Alfred Clem Bly, they're responding to other people. They traveled on the other side of the Mississippi to meet with people, other kind of curious types. There was a story of a taxi driver said that he picked somebody up in west of Memphis and drove him 400 miles that night. Yes. So there's all kinds of little weird, quirky things, and Bojangles is definitely one of them. So that, to me, Bojangles, other people see that that's the real murderer. To me, that's just another thing that went wrong, and I think it's a shortcoming of the police. So I don't discount the shortcomings of the police, but they did do the work, and a lot of that work is available. So you can see a lot of their notes. So to say that everything got lost, I think is incorrect. But yeah, so I don't see Bojangles as something diminishing the other people's culpability at all.
I completely agree. It's absolutely possible that he could have been involved. There could have been more people involved than just these three that got caught up. And it could have been a combination of that and maybe smoke and mirrors, maybe even the cab ride, could be smoke and mirrors. Like sometimes that's enough to create reasonable doubt. That would be something that could throw people off enough that they can say the cops didn't even look for this gentleman, they didn't look for this gentleman, they didn't look for anyone. They just, again, they had that tunnel vision and they went in on him. Again, that's dangerous because you're muddying the waters, you're putting on your own blinders, and you could start ignoring the facts. Based on what I've read in your blogs, your book, and a couple other books I've read, it's clear that they were into this occult activity and it was with other people. So who's to say that there wasn't anyone else there that night? It's absolutely possible that is the case.
Absolutely. Echols lived across from that park a year before. He lived in an apartment building that doesn't exist anymore. The park's been plowed over, so all that stuff is gone. But a lot of that evidence or knowledge and that from the time is in those court documents. You can see it in my book. And time doesn't change those facts. It doesn't change that evidence. And, people saw him at the site. I mean, that's during the court documents. I mean, he was at a softball court thing, admitting. That's a huge thing. If you're admitting that you're involved in it, that's a problem. So you kind of go back and can hammer over these facts, but sometimes for these other people, they just don't sink in. They always think they're innocent, or they think that Boss Hogg is working there in Arkansas or the KKK. You're just not going to get through to those people. That's why you have courts of law with trained people who are trying to objectively solve these problems. And he had representation, so it's the Hollywoodized. I mean, it's sad, but part of it, and if not most of it, is really the Hollywoodized version of reality. Once it goes into that, the interest of these Hollywood people, sensationalism, sales, publicity. In my opinion, that's really how it all changed in the public mind. And I think you can lay the blame on all those. In my opinion, you can lay the blame on the celebrities and Hollywood as a concept in general of the interest and how somebody would want to take something as serious as that and still kind of skew it with the public. And then you got to really watch. It just goes back to how you get your information and things like that. So, yeah.
Do you think some of these celebrities are just taking up the cause wrongfully out of their goodness of their heart?
Yeah, I think that some probably just believe the cover narrative, and I think that underneath some of those they're, in my opinion, they're fellow travelers. So with Echols, and so that's really kind of what is it. If you really research some of these people, you kind of like you'd be. I mean, it's pretty terrifying stuff. They're dangerous. Some of these people, in my opinion, are dangerous.
And one final piece, I'll just for people who are knowledgeable on the case. What could you speak to about Aaron Hutchinson and Vicki Hutchinson? So Aaron Hutchinson gave that confession about what happened there that day, and then Vicki Hutchinson was the mother who did a bit of, I guess, investigating on her own / mudding things up on the police. I think she maybe made things more difficult for the police.
Right? She changed her story.
So she also said the police pressured her based on probably her, I think she had like some credit cards fraud or scam going on. She had some sort of run-in with the law, and maybe they used that as leverage.
So her story changed. I think she said that her son knew the kids, or she was something. So then she investigated herself after the murders. She went on some night thing with them out to Sabat or something like that. So that was her original story. And then she said it was all a lie, if I remember. So whether she got turned or what, I don't know what happened. But that's, I think, an important part of the case. But if you excise that case from the court trial, you're still at the same outcome. So
fair enough.
It doesn't matter if it's there or not. She's, to me, just kind of the high weirdness and strange things that happened, like Bojangles, the weird taxi ride, who else was involved, the larger cult, Alfred Clembly, the traveling around, who I forgot what the guy's name, who they answered to. But, I mean, they used to walk around with staves and all kinds of weird stuff that's gone. But, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting part of the story. But like I said, it doesn't take away from the other evidence that that led to the juries to say they were guilty.
Fair enough, William. You've given me your time, and I do appreciate it. So, for our viewers and listeners, real quick, where can they find you, my friend?
Well, if they want a signed copy, then go to William Ramsey Investigates. Some of my old videos, I think, are still on YouTube that I've done about this case. I did a lot of research into it. So you can go to, YouTube and check it out. I've done like interviews with Gary Meese and Roberta Glass on the case. A recent one, actually, about the DNA issues. That's on my podcast, William Ramsey Investigates. And then I have 5 documentaries at Vimeo under William Ramsey, if you're interested. Really, my story, Prophet of Evil, is really about Crowley, which I think is kind of unique. I try not to keep a biased view of him. And yeah, that's it. So my stuff's around. It's out there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for Divulgence, you can find us on Twitter at DivulgencePod. We're on Instagram at DivulgencePod. You can find our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon Music. And I'm currently working on getting on Rockfin for video versions, just for those who may not want to support YouTube. So please, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and everyone have yourself a wonderful day. Thanks again, Bill, for coming by.
Thanks, Jordan. Great to be with you again.
You too. Take care.